Welcome back. Now, a day after the Army Chief took the government to the Supreme Court in the row over his age, the government has decided to fight him and stand firm. The Prime Minister today held consultations with his senior ministers, and today the centre moved the Supreme Court with a caveat that it be heard before any order is passed. The government is keenly watching to see what the court would do. Sources have told NDTV that they are keen that the case gets dismissed from the court itself. Now, earlier today, I spoke to former Defence Minister Jaswant Singh, who had some scathing words for the Ministry of Defence. Well, as that unprecedented row plays out between the Chief of Army Staff and the government over his date of birth, joining us on NDTV today is the former Defence Minister of India, Mr. Jaswant Singh, who's also had a career in the Army as an officer. Mr. Singh, thank you for speaking to us today. As the Army Chief, takes this matter to court, it's an unprecedented situation, sir. In your view, do you think he should have gone to court?
No, I think you placed the question wrong. Do you think the government ought to have conducted the entire responsibility that it bears in this rather haphazard manner? That is the question we need to be addressing ourselves to. The Chief, as a citizen, is entitled to all the rights and, of course, the obligations and duties that a citizenship entails. But I cannot possibly forgive the government for treating the situation in such a casual and in a totally unforgivable manner. This is a tantamount to blunting the sword arm of the country. You can't treat the Chief of Army Staff in a manner in which he is compelled ultimately to seek recourse to a court of law. And it really demonstrates the kind of... What?
Sorry to interrupt you, sir, but the Army Chief of the country is actually not just an ordinary citizen. He is the Army Chief, and therefore, given the sensitivities of his post, do you think he should have taken it as far as going to the Supreme Court? And I take your point on how the government has handled it. I'll come to that later. But on the Army Chief himself, given the sensitivity of his position, should there have been a better way for him to have also dealt with this?
I think he's tried all the possible better ways, because after all, what is he attempting to correct? He's not asking, and I think that's where the great error in judgment, or most of the discussion that I've had occasion to read, lies. He's not seeking a change of his date of birth. What he is seeking is a rectification of mistakes in the records of the government. He is not seeking this for the sake of greater service, of longer service. He's seeking, that is what he says. I go by what he's saying. It's a matter of honor and pride for the office. After all, if the Chief ought not to have, as you ever, to have gone to the Supreme Court, could the Defence Minister or the Prime Minister not have requested the Chief or walked up to the Chief's office and said, look, let's sort it out. What is the problem? It's an elementary matter of sorting out government records. But you can't continuously... Sorry, go ahead.
There's also a problem in that, General V.K. Singh also accepted in writing that he would accept 1950 as his date of birth when he was promoted some years ago. Now that is now being cited as the government as proof that he accepted their version. That also puts him in a bit of a spot.
No, it is being cited, I realize, and it's a very trite and I find rather shabby manner of treating the situation, because that assurance was sought from the General by a previous Chief on the ground that if you do not do this, the promotions of other officers are likely to be thwarted. Now, you could find fault for him to have accepted it because he sought an assurance at that occasion from the Chief who asked him to do it, will you please immediately rectify after? And then Chief said, yes, I'll rectify, and then went back on it. So we are seeing something which is extremely distasteful. I'm revolted by the entire episode, You can't treat the army in this casual fashion, and that is really the point I have. There is such a disconnect today in the country between the civil and the military that because the military stands up and says, please correct this wrong, therefore the entire civil community of the government, particularly the bureaucracy, stands up and says, no, this is wrong, this is mutinous behavior. We can't have a chief asking for rectification of records, and when that is not done, no, for him to go to a court is wrong.
But sir, do you feel that General V.K. Singh should resign then? Do you think that if this is a matter of honor and prestige, he should step down?
Yes. Isn't that what the bureaucracy really wants him to do?
So he should stay on and fight?
I personally think here is a situation that has arisen. I would ordinarily, because I'm not given to, I would ordinarily, personally, I would have difficulties. But here is a situation that has been created by not the obstinacy or the doggedness of the Chief of Army Staff, but the obduracy and simple, not so simple really, mindlessness of the government of India in addressing a situation which was sensitive. If it was sensitive, why did the defense minister sit on the whole situation month after month? Simplest. I'm amazed at the incompetence, lack of understanding, and sheer folly of treating such a sensitive issue in such an insensitive manner.
Right. So you've made it very clear that you support the army chief in his fight against the government. You feel that he should take this fight to its logical... Yes, you want him to take it...
Please understand, it's not the army chief as an individual I'm supporting. I'm supporting the institution of the Chief of Army Staff, because that represents something in the hierarchy of affairs of the nation. Don't blunt the sword arm of the country.
All right, Mr. Jaswant Singh, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Thank you, sir. And our big talking point tonight, as the Army Chief and the government face off now in the Supreme Court, should the Army Chief resign? Should he step down as he fights this battle with the centre? We have a very special panel of defence analysts tonight. We're joined by Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad from Delhi. We have Major General G.D. Bakshi here in the studio, also Brigadier Mahalingam. Also with us tonight, Senior Advocate from the Supreme Court, Dushyant Dave. Mr. Dave, my question is to you first. I'm curious. This is an awkward situation, I guess, for the Supreme Court as well, because it's never happened before that the country's army chief has taken his own government to court. Do you think the court would even be inclined to take up this case? I know it's hard to predict and look at a crystal ball, but what do you think?
I don't think it would be proper to speculate on that for the moment, but I can speak about the law which Supreme Court has laid down for the last several decades. And that's very crystal clear. The law is that everybody has a right to have his birth date corrected. Every officer has that right. But you have to do it within the procedural time limit which is prescribed, which I believe in this case is 2 years. Now, in 1974-75 in the army list, General was shown to have been born in 1950. He has never taken any steps since then to have that corrected, much less take legal recourse. So I would assume that Supreme Court has said that these belated applications for correction of birth dates, particularly on the verge of retirement, is something Supreme Court has seriously frowned upon and commented. More because the Supreme Court feels that it has a chain reaction and affects the chances of promotion of large number of officers. So as the law stands, I think it would be very difficult for the General to really get relief from the Supreme Court. But, the facts will have to be examined by the court. Undoubtedly, if somebody approaches, the court is bound to hear him out. So, I mean, that's something which Supreme Court, I think, is very nice to...
Sure, but do you think he should step down before he, goes ahead with this legal battle? Is it appropriate, you think, for the Army Chief to be fighting this battle when he's still the serving Army Chief?
Look, I'll tell you something which is disturbing me as a citizen and as a lawyer. Army has and armed forces have seriously followed this discipline, that if even a small young officer tries to bring some political pressure for his promotion or transfer or posting, the army higher authorities take an extremely dim view and take serious disciplinary action. Now, in a case like this, large number of MPs have met the Prime Minister. The General himself has called on the ministers. I think it really is disgusting. I find it completely unacceptable that this should have been allowed to be raked up. More so because, as you said earlier in your program, the General has given in writing in January of 2008 on 2 occasions that he accepts the date to be 1950. Having accepted the promotion, I don't think it's fair for a Chief of the Army Staff. Indian Army is a great institution. We have great officers and soldiers. I think the General is really minimizing the institution of Indian Army and doing a great disservice to the Army itself. And this controversy that there is a fight between the civil side of the army and the defense personnel is, to say the least, extremely disgusting, because that really shows the entire nation in an extremely poor light. I don't think this kind of a debate should be allowed to go on at all. I think if government has any wisdom, government should sack him.
You think the government should sack him? General Bakshi, I know you feel very strongly about this. Do you think the army chief should step aside? Absolutely, at least?
I have no doubt about it.
Okay. What do you think?
The process of resigning, the ethics of resigning a field command are contingent upon whether that resignation will have the impact which it is desired. A resignation generally is desired to have an impact. Look, I am disgusted with the way you have treated me. Most of us thought that the army chief would resign. Most of us really thought, the veterans. But when we found that when he put up his statutory complaint to the government, which was in itself unprecedented, he had been driven to it, we expected the government to apply its mind. It is being made as if he has no case. May I kindly remind my august friends here, including my legal luminary, that 4 former Chief Justices of the Supreme Court of this country have seen the body of evidence that has been produced, and they have recorded their evidence in writing, their opinion in writing, in support of the army chief. To say that it has no basis in law or it doesn't merit...
We're not the court, so that's not for us to decide.
So to that extent, but there are 4 Chief Justices.
Sure. But on the principle,
you don't respect the institution of the chief. You don't want to respect the institution of the former Chief Justices of this country and a person of the eminence and probity of Justice Verma. You see, so that is what one is trying to say. But what we are saying here is, when we found that he put up his statutory complaint, even while it was being considered, the Raksha Mantri ji went to the Parliament and made a statement, emphatic statement, that his date of birth is 1950. Period. I mean, we are not prepared to examine what you have put up. You see, when you close your avenues of redress, and when we found the insensitive manner in which this had been treated, the very insensitive manner in which this had been treated, it was quite apparent that a resignation would have had no desired impact. It would have just served the purposes of the bureaucrats. And number 2, no, please, let me finish. A resignation you can give would have been accepted. His statutory complaint was supposed to be redressed in 90 days. It just went on and on till there was...
Okay, till there was leave? After filing this petition in the Supreme Court, Brigadier Mahalingam, should he have at least taken leave?
No, why should he? I think every individual of the Indian Army has right, from a chief to the soldier, has a right to go to the court. Today you have tainted ministers, bureaucrats who are still continuing service. He is not tainted. He is seeking justice. If he is seeking justice, why should he resign? There is no question of him resigning. He should continue. On the other point, which he had mentioned, someone had mentioned earlier, this 2-year rule. 2-year rule is meant for change of date of birth. He is not asking for change of date of birth. His date of birth is settled well before he entered the gates of the National Defence Academy. What happens is, the agency which is responsible for recording and as also verifying is the AG's branch. The AG's branch has categorically stated that his date of birth is 1951. And then where has this dispute come up?
And may I just interject? It is the government which has asked the AG's branch to change the date on its records. It is the other way around. It's not he who has asked for it.
But we now find ourselves, General Shankar Prasad, in a very...
I'm sorry, one point.
Sure.
There is this question of 2 years rule has no meaning.
Absolutely no relevance in this case.
But we're finding ourselves now in this unprecedented situation, you know, for the first time in this country's history where the army chief is suing his own government. General Shankar Prasad, you know, how does this need to be handled from here? It's very clear that this has been extremely badly handled by the government. That's very obvious here. Now, where do we go from here? And do you believe that the institution now of the army has really come under a cloud because of this episode?
Well, let me first of all start by saying I do not want to make any political statements, nor do I want to make what is called politically right or politically aggressive statements. It is a matter which appears to me very simple and straightforward as it stands today. The time for the Chief of the Army Staff to resign is far left behind. I don't think the time is now possible for him to resign. That should have happened, if at all, quite some time ago. The matter is now in the battlefield. The Chief of the Army Staff has put in a petition into the Supreme Court with all the evidence at his command, and it is for the court to see and examine what that evidence discloses and what finally the Supreme Court decides. On the same time, as we are all aware from the media reports today, that the government has put in a caveat, and that clearly means that the government wishes to tell the Supreme Court, before you take any decision, you must see what is our point of view. When the statutory complaint is put up by the Chief of the Army Staff, the government would have considered whatever documents that they were in possession. Let us be very clear. When the evidence about his age or whatever else the Chief of the Army Staff wanted to put up, it must have been enclosed with a statutory complaint and available to the government to consider. Having got that all documents and having considered it in the Ministry of Defence and on reference to Ministry of Law and on reference to Attorney General, who are all currently serving in the Government of India, and finally the Ministry of Defence has taken a decision to reject that statutory complaint, there must be some very good reasons to reject that complaint. And therefore, when they file the caveat now in Supreme Court, having got access to all the evidence that the Chief has produced before the Supreme Court, the government would answer all his queries in a caveat to the Supreme Court, and it is for the Supreme Court to now take a view as to whether they need to admit the application at all, or whether they need to reject it, or whether they need to further examine it and let both sides put up their cases. Now we have to now watch. It is a very sad day for this country. It's a very sad day for the army. It's a very sad day for all of us to be talking on television about a very august office of a Chief of Army Staff and a gentleman who must have been an outstanding officer to have reached the position of a Chief of Army Staff. Everybody doesn't become a Chief of Army Staff. And let me also tell you, while legally it may be perfectly all right for an ordinary citizen to go to court and seek justice, please understand that the Chief of the Army Staff is not an ordinary gentleman. He is a Chief of the Indian Army,
so
Chief of the National Security.
Should that Chief of Army Staff have been driven to this? Should that Chief of Army Staff have been driven to this?
Permitted to complete? May I please be permitted to complete, please?
No, sir,
I've been never
on
objected to whatever anybody else was saying.
Sure, sir, go
Can
ahead.
I please be permitted to complete?
Go ahead, sir, complete your point.
If somebody is going to object to it, there is no debate, there is nothing. I mean, everybody has a point of view. I do not want to say whether General Bakshi is right or wrong. Everybody is entitled to have an assessment and his view. Please permit me to say what I want to say. And what I want to say is this, that it is very sad for all of us to have a Chief of the Army Staff who is not an individual. He is an institution. And the august office that he holds is something that everyone looks up to. Let us not mess around with it. If some injustice has been done, it should have been resolved between the government and him far earlier than before they went to the court. And despite having all the resolution attempts, if it was not sorted out, well, I don't think it is fair for the Chief of the Army Staff to go to the court and to see self before service on the cover page of an India Today magazine makes us sadder still. We have now completely lost the service before self attitude of ours. Now, whatever General Bakshi may feel, it is entitled to have his feelings. Nobody is going to question him, and I don't wish to question him anyway. But I have a view, and I'm given it, and I really feel it is very hurtful to see an army chief, with an outstanding career behind him go to the court and seek justice there. Justice should have been given to him by the government, within the government, and matters should have been closed and not become a debate in the drawing rooms of people.
Yeah, it's not an ordinary citizen. It's the army chief,
now
it's the institution.
Now can I have my say, please? Because you know, I've heard a diatribe. Now can I have my say? Right. What I am trying to state is, we fully agree, I fully endorse that opinion that the chief of the army staff, the commander of a 1.1 million strong army, is not an ordinary citizen. Should he have been treated worse than an ordinary citizen? Should he have been brought to this very sad denouement that he has had to seek justice from the Supreme Court? Should a chief have been driven to this? As the general very rightly pointed out, he did not anoint himself the chief. He was made the chief by this government, and should the government not have decided on this particular age row before he became the chief? Mr. Julka, the Joint Secretary G, had ordered a court of inquiry. Why was that court of inquiry not held and this situation allowed to come to this pass? But, Nidhi, I want to please make a point. He is a combat soldier. Now there are chiefs and there are chiefs, and they're all very respectable and honorable men. He has a particular place in the hearts of his soldiers because he is a combat soldier. He has fought every war that this country could possibly have sent him to. He has become a chief because of that. The most, distressing thing about this whole case is, when he took over, he started a campaign against corruption in the army. He dealt severely with very senior officer. When you are trying to oust this officer in such an unabashed manner, what signal are you sending to your rank and file and to the country at large? Don't fight corruption. We will make an example out of you.
Okay,
Is this the message that you are sending?
Mr. Dave, why do you shake your head? Mr. Dave, why do you shake your head? Because there are many, many who have talked about this corruption theory, but also... Yeah, sure.
Let me say one thing to these distinguished army officers, all of whom are held in great esteem by me and the nation. But I may remind them the words that the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court has spoken about the armed forces, and I quote, please allow me, "Morale and discipline are indeed the very soul of an army, and no other consideration, howsoever important, can outweigh the need to strengthen the morale of the armed forces and to maintain discipline amongst them. Any relaxation in the matter of morale and discipline may prove disastrous and ultimately lead to chaos and ruination, affecting the well-being and imperiling the human rights of entire people of the country." Now these are the words spoken of the army. If an army chief goes to the court on an issue which he shouldn't have gone, because one of the things that is very important about change of a date, whatever these officers may call it, 1950 or 1951, you can change it provided you have suffered an injustice, a serious injustice. If supposing General Singh was being denied promotion as Chief of the Army Staff in 2008 on account of a wrong date, he could have perhaps taken up the issue. But he has got 2.5 years as Chief of the Army Staff. We have had large number of Chief Justices who have retired in 10 and 20 days. Okay. I mean, I can't understand he has not suffered any injustice. Therefore, he has no right really to maintain this. More so, because he gave a word.
For him, it's an issue of principle and integrity, which is what he maintains.
Yes, let us take a case if he had quietly left the army service on the date which the government had spelled out to him. What message would he send it to the rank and file? And what would be the morale of the troops then? Today, as you know, the entire atmosphere is vitiated. There are so many lies and so many non-facts have been told to the people. And
the only message is that my father gave a wrong birth date.
His father didn't give a wrong birthday.
That's it, nothing else. There is no question of honor here.
Let me say this, in government service, no government service, you can announce your date of birth and have it accepted. It is always by your date of birth certificate.
Okay, 1 second. I just have a couple of quick comments from the audience. General Bakshi.
Yeah. The point is, every citizen of India has a right to get his or her date of birth rectified. But why did it took 37 years for the army chief? He joined Indian Army somewhere in 74, 75. So did it took 37 years for him to rectify? For us, every citizen of India, the time limit as set by the law is 2 years.
Why has it taken so long? I'll let you answer that. Let me just take some more comments. Let me just take some more questions, sir. Yeah, you had a question, yeah.
Sir, as we have seen the things happening in Pakistan, the army chief going against the Prime Minister. So, sir, events like this, they give a lot of courage to the high-ranked people who are going to take his place later on. So, are we heading towards the case?
You think it sets a bad precedent? Not a fair comparison, though, with Pakistan, I would say, yeah.
Ma'am, I had a question. It's already, we have seen that in all these cases, everything is revolving around honor. But is that really a question of honor? I think it's more than that. He's looking forward to one more year. And I want to question him.
No.
Is he really...
Okay, let me take one more
I'm
comment.
glad you asked this.
Okay,
my question is, why the government and political parties are taking too much interest in that issue? Why they are not taking interest in the public issues? Why India is a democratic country, and each and every person has a right to go to judiciary system to have his settle his matter.
You feel he has a right to go to court. Okay, last comments from the panel tonight.
Now,
yes.
Look, I think you framed the issue beautifully, because that shows the difference between the civilian, perception of things. All my civilian friends ask me, why is he getting so exercised? About 10 more months in office. For the love of the Lord, please understand, to the army, we have a different subculture. When I joined the NDA, I was initiated into what is called the honor code. And may I just again quote it to you. We will not lie, cheat or steal or tolerate amongst us those who do so.
Okay.
So this
is about honor?
The first, caveat that is put, the first injunction, you will not tell lies. What are you accusing the chief of? 50 or 51 is a lie. We are entitled to ask the chief today,
I think
did you lie to us?
Accusing himself.
Did you lie to us?
Okay, wait, I just have 30 seconds. General Shankar Prasad, your last thoughts on this.
Well, I wish the Chief of the Army Staff would have devoted more time to more serious matters that the Army faces today. It faces serious issues of modernization. It faces serious issues of pay commissions, one rank, one pension, ECHS, and a million other things. I wish he would go to the government and fight on those matters rather than fight on a personal matter. It is something that really hurts us.
Right. Gentlemen, I have to leave it at that.
Do you know that in the last 1.5 years, the modernization as per Hindustan Times report of the Air Force and the Navy has remained on track. The Hindustan Times reports that the modernization of the Army has gone off track in the last 1.5 years.
Is that the fault of the Army?
Fight for that. I wish we'd fight for more important issues.
Right,
no, I think that's a very important... No, sorry, I would like to rebut this. 27 years, we haven't gotten a medium gun after Bofors. You are blaming this chief for the last 2.5 years? From the 1960s, you haven't changed your AD guns and missiles. You are blaming this chief? For the last 60 or almost 20 years, you haven't changed your helicopter fleet. You are blaming this chief?
All right, gentlemen.
I mean, this is amazing.
Gentlemen, I think we need to calm tempers here. I know this is a very emotive issue, one where there are very strong views on both sides. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight, but I'd also like to tell you we'll be looking at this issue.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
I just would like to say that for once the government has not goofed up. I think it has acted on record, and it has acted as per the law declared by the Supreme Court. It has consulted the Attorney General. I think it should have been given a final burial.
All right. Well, let's see what the Supreme Court does eventually do with this petition. It's expected to possibly come up for hearing this week. We'll keep a close eye on that story. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Thank you very much. We all see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock.